Well, praise God. It's great to be in the presence of God. What did the psalmist say? It's pleasant to worship with brethren. So this morning we have a special guest. Most of you know him. His name is Chris Russell. Chris has been out here numerous times. He's involved with a ministry that we have gotten very much behind, a ministry called Destiny Rescue. And it rescues children out of the sex trade. And it's a horrible, horrible thing. We're living in a fallen world. And Satan's the god of this world. But Jesus is coming back. And he's going to deliver this world and bring about a kingdom of righteousness. Until that time, we work. We pray, we work, we support, and we ask God for grace. And so I'm going to have Chris come up, and he's going to share with us a little more about some of his own personal struggles this year, but the ministry of Destiny Rescue. So, Chris, come on up here.
Thank you, brother. Well, good morning, everyone. It's always good to be here. I think we were talking about this, I think of my 5th year here. So how many of you have been at a Rescue Sunday before? Yeah, good portion of you. So, yeah, it's good to be back here. I'm going to start off a little different today because my last 6 months ended up being quite a bit different than I had been planning, but we know how that works, right? Remember the saying life is what happens when you're making other plans, right? So back in October, I went in for my yearly doctor visit, and I always am trying to be proactive with my health and talk to her about, what can I do here to, be a little proactive here in this next year. And she had suggested that I go and do a calcium heart scan, and wanted to get kind of a baseline to kind of keep an eye on for over the years. If anything ended up happening, medication, any of that kind of stuff, thought it's a good thing to do. So I went and got the calcium heart scan, and the next day they called and they said, hey, everything looks great with your heart. You got a score of 0, which is what we want to see, like absolutely no signs of any issues at all. And then the wonderful word, you know what that was? But, all right. Everything looks great with your heart, but the scan found a 9.2 centimeter mass in your chest. Yeah, and that's all I had to sit on for 2 weeks. 9.2 centimeter mass in the chest. Size of my fist, about this big on the back side of the lung. I think we've all been at places in life where you suddenly get the wind knocked out of your sail, or you get your feet kicked out from under you. Everybody been there? I mean, maybe it's been a medical thing. Maybe it's been something with a child. Maybe it's been something with a spouse, boyfriend, girlfriend, something at work, something at school. We have those moments. And the reality is, in those moments, fear creeps in, doesn't it? Natural thing for us to experience. We've all experienced it in different capacities. And I was reminded of 2 Timothy 1:7 that says, God does not give us a spirit of fear, but of power and love of a sound mind. To recognize that fear is something that the spiritual enemy loves to use against us. And boy, does he like to use it, doesn't he? I think we can all look back at our lives and admit there's been times where he's had some victory in our lives by using that tool of fear. But processing fear, I think, brings about 2 important discoveries. Because fear brings about the what-if questions, right? What if this? What if that? Like, what if this happens with my spouse? What if my kid does this? Or what if my kid doesn't do this, right? What if we can't get pregnant? What if we have 18 kids? There's all kinds of what-ifs that can bring about fear, right? I live in an Amish community around me, so that's a reality for some of the families around there. So, But processing those what-if questions brings about 2 important discoveries. First, it reminds us of what we value the most, right? If we fear about something, it's because we care about it, right? So what we fear about shows what we value the most, but it also reveals where we trust God the least. It shows what we value the most, but it also reveals where we trust God the least and where we have some work to do. And as I was leaning into that 2-week period and talking with God about this, and because, you know, we've heard stories about that. You hear about people that seem totally healthy. They go in, get some medical news. 4 months later, they're gone, right? So it happens. And you're sitting in there, you know, thinking like, all right, God, is this like a little speed bump in my life? Or is this like major detour coming up here, right? And I was reminded of King David. You remember before he was the king and he was on the run from Saul. Remember Saul was trying to kill him several times, right? And he said, you know, my adversaries pursue me, but I choose to focus on God. What can mere mortals do to me? And you read that and you're like, that's right. What can mere mortals do to you? But then you stop and think about it. I'm like, they could do a lot to you, David. I mean, they could capture you, they could torture you, they could kill you. That seems pretty significant to me, right? But what David was saying was when you take your eyes off of the earthly, temporary, and you put it on what is eternal and what is good and what is righteous, everything here pales in comparison. The worst thing that anybody could do to us here just pales in comparison to the goodness of our God. And we take comfort in that. And I was reminded of, there's a couple of stories in Scripture about Jesus in a boat. And, you know, early on in the time with the disciples and Jesus, we read about the story of they're out in the boat all together, right? And the storm kicks up. What happens? Disciples, freak mode, right? Because they're totally overwhelmed by what's going on around them. What happens? Fear. When the circumstances changes, fear, right? What's Jesus doing? He's taking a nap, right? And then, eventually they all panic and they go to get him up. And what's the question they ask? Like, don't you even care? And I think if we've been walking with God for a while, all of us have had a time where we've asked that question, haven't we? God, don't you even care about my marriage? Don't you care about what's going on with my kid or what's going on with my mom and dad? Don't you care about what's going on with my health, with my job? God, I'm unemployed. Like, how am I going to take care of my family? Don't you even care? We've all had those questions. And they're asking that question. Don't you even care? Of course, we know the rest of that story. Jesus gets up and what? He calms the storm. But most importantly, he calms the disciples, right? Flash forward. Now they've lived life with him for a while. They've seen this man show up. They've seen him teach. They've seen him perform miracles. And they've seen that day after day, he shows up. He is who he says he is. He does what he says he's going to do. And they've seen it over and over and over again. And there's a trust that's been built. And the next story we read about is the disciples are out in the boat. And then what? Jesus walks on water to go out to them. And good old Peter, any normal person would just wait till the guy got to the boat, right? There's nothing in us that's natural for us to be like, hey, I'm just going to step right on out of this boat here, right? There's nothing that does that. But Peter recognized something that I recognized in that 2-week period, is that regardless of the circumstances, no matter how scary they are, no matter how much they don't make sense, the best place that we can ever be is wherever Jesus is. And for Peter, that meant getting out of the boat because he wanted to be where Jesus was. And I hope that my last 6 months can be an encouragement to you of if you're going through something right now, the winds have been knocked out of your sails, your feet have been swept out, some news that you got has really just thrown you off your game, is to be reminded that our God never gets caught off guard. There's nothing that was going to happen in any of those medical things that I did and any of those consulting and any of that stuff. There was nothing new that was going to come out of that, and they would get a report where God was going to be like, wow, I did not know that. All right? That wasn't going to happen. God is beside me, and he goes before me as well. The best place to be is wherever he is. So just to give you an update, they did a whole bunch of testing, and they classified it as a duplicate cyst, which are rare. Where I had it is even more rare, and my pulmonologist said it was the biggest one he'd ever seen. I've lived by the motto, go big or go home, a lot of my life, but that wasn't really what I was aiming for in this situation. So it needed to come out. I was told that I'd be in the hospital 3 to 7 nights, depending on with chest tube, and they might have to take out some of the lung because it might be attached there. They were going to try to do it laparoscopically, but if they couldn't, they were going to have to kind of fillet me open to be able to get in there and everything. Surgery was almost exactly 4 weeks ago. Didn't have to touch the lung, didn't have to fillet me open. I was home 25 hours after my surgery. So I know we had people here praying. A lot of churches that I get to work with around the country, very humbled by the amount of people that were praying for this. So if you were in the know on that and praying, thank you very much for that. So yeah, I was told you're not like going anywhere for 6 weeks. So 4 weeks, here I am in lovely Chicago with you guys. So grateful for that. Always love being here. So as we get started here, kind of you'll see the tie-in later on with all of this, but something that I love that happens every 4 years, not the election. There's nothing there, nothing exciting about any of that kind of stuff. But I am reminded of this, because our country is in such a state of fear, and just to be reminded of where we place our hope and our trust. The seat of the president will constantly be changing, but the one who is entrenched on the throne is the one where we place our faith. That's where we place our eyes. That's where we set our eyes. That's where we put our focus. Amen. So I just can't imagine being someone that lives their life dependent on the government for their hope. Can you imagine? But there's a lot of people out there that are exactly like that. And there's massive fear going on right now because that's their source of hope. And praise be to God, that's not our source of hope, right? That God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And we take great encouragement in that. So, but the thing I'm talking about that happens every 4 years that I love, and I watch highlights of this like throughout the year for years afterwards and everything too, because it was in the fall. It was the Olympics. How many of you anybody like just watch a crazy amount of Olympics? I love the Olympics, record like all of it. So much stuff that I enjoy in that. I love the stories of the Olympians, especially like the smaller countries where like you can tell they just have to overcome a lot to even like be able to get there. Like raising the funds for it and just the opportunities, and then when they get a medal like that, I just love the stories of the different Olympians. And one of my favorites, you guys might recognize the story, maybe not the name, Yusuf Dikats from Turkey. Anybody recognize that name? Didn't figure you would. So he was from Turkey, competed in the 10-meter air pistol mixed team finals. Okay. So if you watch this, you look this up. When these guys are going out and shooting, they're in all this kind of specialized gear that they're wearing, okay? I mean, they got outfits that they're wearing. They got special ear protection stuff they got. They've got, like, the one guy I saw had this ear protection and then, like, had this thin piece of metal going across and had different lenses that you could flip down in front of your eye before you took the shot. Like, it was ridiculous, the amount of money and technology that, like, goes into this event. Meanwhile, you got Yusuf, who walks out in his Walmart prescription glasses, his $2 airplane earplugs, T-shirts, and jeans, raises his arm, takes a shot, wins a silver medal. And I love the quote. It said, one dude has all the Cyclops gear, and Yusuf just looks like a dad at the carnival on a Saturday afternoon, winning his daughter a prize at the shooting game. I was like... I love that. I love volleyball, swimming, track, and field are my three favorites for the Summer Olympics. Watch more track than I've ever watched this year. You got people who train so hard for so many years, and the results of the race come down to the smallest fractions of a second between those who get medals and those who don't. Like, that's just fascinating to me. Anybody recognize this guy? Noah Lyles, recognized as the fastest man in the world, right? He runs the 100-meter sprint. One of the closest finishes ever. Lyle wins the race by 5 thousandths of a second to retain his title as the fastest man in the world. And this guy here was not familiar with him at all before the Olympics, probably one of my favorites. Cole Hawker. And he was in the 1,500 meter, which is just under a mile run, all right? So this race probably was my favorite moment in the Olympics as far as the actual event itself. The commentators were talking about how confident the favorites were. None of them were Americans, and you could see the confidence. You ever see that, like, right before they're introducing each lane, and they got the camera guy, like, right here in their face, and they're all just like, big old chain around their neck. I'm like, you got to have some confidence, right? If you're a world-class athlete, there's got to be some confidence. But I don't know. I'm not sure where confidence ends and arrogance begins. But I think they crossed the line, most of them, on that. But so the race starts, and Cole settles into 7th position out of 12 runners and kind of slowly is moving his way up. The people who are predicted to win the thing, they're leading the entire thing. They get to the final curve, and when everybody else kicks it up 1 notch, Cole kicks it up 2 notches, ends up passing everybody, and wins the gold medal. Like, just one of the most amazing races I've ever seen. And not to take anything away from Noah Lyles, because he's obviously an amazing athlete. But who decided that it's the person who runs the 100-meter distance the fastest that gets the title of fastest man in the world? Who made that decision? Why isn't it the guy like Cole who runs essentially the mile faster than anybody? Why doesn't he get the title of fastest man in the world? Because for me, it's the person who has to show endurance that's far more impressive than the person who can light it up for 10 seconds. For me, it's the person who has to navigate and weave through traffic strategically for the long haul that's way more impressive than someone who's given a straight lane to sprint for a very short period of time. I mean, if we want to talk endurance and commitment, how about the guys and the women that did the full marathons? Guy who won the gold in the full marathon this year, new Olympic record, 2 hours, 6 minutes, and 26 seconds for a full marathon. My best is 2 hours and 23 minutes for a half. All right, this guy was flying. But over the course of our lives, you and I are running a lot of races. And it's the things that capture our minds and our hearts the most that determine what kind of races we are going to run. And it's the things that matter the most and the nearest and dearest to the heart of God that should sync up with the kinds of marathons you and I choose to run. And when I think about this issue of human trafficking, and specifically sex trafficking of children, we are talking about one of the most significant marathons to be a part of. Because while we have our share of people who get in the fight for the 100-meter short-term race, we have more and more who are joining us in the long-term marathon race. More and more realize that God is raising up an army to engage in this evil, and they're stepping up and they're committing to do whatever it takes to rescue kids year after year after year. And I'm so grateful to partner with a church like yours that is the epitome of long-distance runners. You guys have been in this fight for years now and show no signs of slowing down anytime soon. And we have to continue to run strong because the battle is big and formidable. But we serve a big, big God, and he invites his kids into the battle with him. In fact, we get our marching orders in Psalm 82, verses 3 and 4. Give justice to the poor and the orphan. Uphold the rights of the oppressed and the destitute. Listen to this. Rescue the poor and the helpless. Deliver them from the grasp of evil people. That's what we literally get to be a part of together. Rescuing these precious kids literally from the grasp of evil people. So 30,000-foot view. Human trafficking, fastest growing criminal activity in the world. By far. Nothing even close to it. Makes over $150 billion a year. Estimated about 99 to 100 billion of that is specifically sex trafficking. And the reason it's growing so fast is you think about that. This is a money-making endeavor here. You sell a gun, you make a profit one time. You own a girl, you're selling her thousands and thousands of times. And our frontline workers, because there's a lot of organizations that work in the aftercare side of stuff, but there's not too many that are actually going into the most dangerous places to get the kids out. And that's our wheelhouse. I mean, we focus on the whole aftercare, training, all that job stuff. We do all of that, but that's what we are well known for. In fact, the new countries that we go into now, we are training the local government on how to do this stuff because we've been doing it for 24 years. And what we do works. So we've added, even since the last time I saw you guys, we're 3 new countries just since last year, since I was here. We got 3 more countries. So we have 16 countries that we have agreements in place with right now and doing this work. I remember I brought Destiny Rescue in 2015 to the church I was pastoring at in Goshen. And I remember very vividly at the end of that year getting the celebration that we got to celebrate that there was 380 rescues that year. Like, I was just like, this is amazing. We've got to continue to be a part of this good work. Do you know how many rescues last year? 4,177 rescues last year. That's 11 every single day of the year average. And we're super excited about that, but man, there's so much more work to do. Because there's a ripple effect of that. 4,177 rescues, and then those individuals are going on and they're changing their families and they're changing their communities and they're changing their countries. Massive ripple effect, 4,000 plus individual lives, but hundreds of thousands of lives that are being impacted because of that. And when Destiny Rescue got started in 2001, Tony didn't know what he was doing. He just knew this wasn't okay. So the first 5 years, it was all about how do we keep kids out of getting pulled into this situation. That was the focus. The next 5 years, 2006 to 11, they wanted to get involved. They started adding to the team, wanted to start rescuing kids, and then learning about how do you do the aftercare to help these kids after they've been through this. So that was the focus the next 5 years. They rescued probably about 50 kids during that time period and really learned about the aftercare side of stuff. So that took us to 2011. In 2011, Tony felt that God put a vision on his heart that this organization was going to go on to rescue over 100,000 individuals out of trafficking. The U.S. team was formed that year in 2011, and just last month, we already passed 20,000 rescues towards that goal. So again, excited about that, but man, there's so much more work still to be done. That's why we've got to be in this. That's why it's a marathon. Like, this can't be a, hey, let's rescue a couple kids this year, feel good about ourselves, and move on with life. It's like, it's too big. There's too much at stake. This is too important. You've talked about this is like the most heinous thing you can possibly think of when you think about something that could happen to a child during our lifetimes. We've got to be in this for the marathon. We've got to weave the obstacles. We've got to figure out the challenges, and we've got to overcome those. And by God's grace, we're doing that. So I'm going to share a story with you today that I've only shared at a few churches before today. It's especially uncomfortable considering the extremely young age of the girl that's involved. But it's going to give you a better idea of what our frontline team is encountering on a daily basis and how they are relentless in their pursuit of setting these precious kids free. This case took 2 years, and we call it the girl behind the green gate. Now, for the purpose of this story, I'm going to refer to our undercover agent as Caleb and the young girl as Chelsea, not using their real names for obvious reasons. Some of you that are familiar with the work may recall that when we partner with a country to do rescue work in that country, we sign what is called an MOU. It's a memorandum of understanding. It's an agreement with each country that clearly spells out what we can and what we cannot do in our efforts to rescue kids and then arrest and prosecute traffickers that are abusing these kids. In some countries, we have an additional MOU in place that allows us to work online to pursue traffickers and break up their exploitation of children on digital platforms. And this is known as OSEC, O-S-E-C, online sexual exploitation of children. And it's just as damaging to victims as it is to victims of other kinds of exploitation, but often much, much more difficult because it's extremely challenging to determine where the actual physical location of the child is. So Caleb's one of our agents that works on the OSEC cases, and in October of a couple years ago, Caleb was contacted by one of his informants in Thailand, and the informant said that he had been contacted by a child trafficker through a dating site, and the criminal was offering live sex videos with very young children. Once Caleb's team fact-checked the information, he went in undercover. And under a false identity, Caleb joined the dating platform, and he didn't have to wait long before he started receiving unsolicited messages from the trafficker about these young children. The trafficker, who we'll call TJ, he sent Caleb horrifying videos of children being sexually abused, some of them as young as 2 years old, as a preview of what kind of services he could provide via live stream. Caleb was furious, as you would expect, right? No child should ever be treated the way these precious little ones were being treated. So he went to work and he pored over the video clips that TJ sent to him. And over months of poring over these video clips, he recognized a distinct building in the background that let him know that the trafficker operated in the Philippines. Now he knew the country. Over the next months, Caleb was part of other operations as well, and he rescued other children, but he never gave up on finding TJ and bringing him to justice. And as he continued to pretend to be a potential buyer, Caleb noticed one little girl in particular, Chelsea, was being offered to him over and over and over again. And he burned with anger every time that he saw that she was being offered up to be abused online for somebody's twisted pleasure. And as Caleb continued his back and forth conversation with TJ in his undercover role, he began to discover new pieces of information about Chelsea. And he was able to put the pieces together to realize that Chelsea was TJ's neighbor, and that her mother was not only compliant in the abuse, but often videotaped it as well. He spent countless hours on TJ's burner Facebook page looking at every picture and video and combing through his contacts and contacts of contacts of contacts. And then a major breakthrough. After months and months more, an image from a person 3 connections away from TJ took his breath away. The profile showed a picture of a woman who lived in the poorest district of a major city in the Philippines, and standing next to her was a little girl that Caleb recognized immediately, as he had seen it over and over and over again in his interactions with TJ. It was precious little Chelsea. Now we knew the city she lived in. Armed with that information, Caleb took the case to the NBI, which is the National Bureau of Investigators. It's the Philippine equivalent to the FBI. They opened an official case, and they encouraged Caleb to keep digging, as they still needed an address to be able to perform a raid. So Caleb dove back in. He knew the city now, but it was a massive city. And he pored over the mother's social media content, and he began to learn more about Chelsea. He saw her dressed for school. He saw her learning how to ride a bike. He attended her 5th birthday party as her mother streamed it live. And all the while, he continued to receive messages from TJ offering this young girl to him to be used in unimaginable ways. In his 20 years of law enforcement and being an undercover agent, this was proving to be the most heart-wrenching and traumatic case of Caleb's career. Between the amount of child abuse material that he was exposed to in his undercover role and the length of the case, it was taking its toll on him. But he was never going to give up on finding Chelsea. And then he noticed it. In several of the mother's pictures, where she appeared to be selling clothes on the street, there was a very unique looking green gate behind her. And in one of the pictures, precious little Chelsea could be seen in front of part of that gate. If we could find the gate, we could find Chelsea. So you know what Caleb turned to? Something you and I often turn to. Google Maps, Street View. And over the next several months, he went street by street, left side, right side, block by block, neighborhood by neighborhood, until finally we found the gate. We knew where Chelsea lived, which also meant we were very, very close to knowing where TJ lived as well. So Caleb took his findings to our partners in the Philippines, and the raid planning began. As Caleb's information about TJ was put together with what the NBI was learning about him, it turned out that the level of trafficking that TJ was doing of children was far beyond anything anybody possibly could have imagined. In fact, at that moment, there were at least 8 international law enforcement agencies hunting him down. He had been selling videos to pedophiles all over the world, but to this point, no one had been able to get to him. One final piece was needed. TJ had to be caught in the act of offering a child for sexual exploitation. So Caleb played his role of a potential buyer one last time. And he told TJ that he was only interested in Chelsea. And after trying to offer him other young children, TJ finally agreed and went to get Chelsea. And as TJ made his way to Chelsea's house, Destiny Rescue and local law enforcement agencies quickly moved into position. TJ video called, and there standing next to him was the precious girl that Caleb had been waiting 2 years to see set free. And after he made the offer for her to be abused for Caleb's pleasure and money, our team had all that it was needed to bring him down. Caleb and the rest of the team descended on the residence, and in moments, TJ was sitting on the concrete in handcuffs. The monster that had evaded so many law enforcement agencies for so long had finally been caught. Chelsea was finally free. With her mother also being taken into custody, Chelsea was taken to a local police station, and she sat with caseworkers and Caleb in a room that had games and toys that were designed to help children decompress after a traumatic event like a raid. And as the caseworkers began to talk with her and she felt safe, she began to play with the toys. And she eventually set up an ice cream stand and started to barter with one of the caseworkers, trying to sell them a delicious ice cream cone. And as Caleb watched Chelsea, this special young girl who he had pursued for 2 years, he was overcome with emotion and he had to step out of the room. And he realized in that moment that it had been worth every minute of every hour of every day and week and month of those 2 years to do what he had to do and go through what he had to go through to set that precious girl free. Guys, those are the kind of people that you are partnering with. Those are the kind of people that when you give your best yes in raising awareness and resources and start this chain of events that ultimately empowers our frontline team to do what they do best. But it takes all of us working together. They can't do what they do unless we do what we need to do as well. Rescuing kids is not a 100-meter sprint. It is a long-distance race that is full of obstacles and challenge and heartbreak that have to be overcome. That's what our frontline team does, and that's what you do. You're a marathon church. The first time you heard about this back when it was a connection with Joe Mann, you guys didn't go, "Oh, that's terrible. Good luck to you. We'll pray for you." That wasn't the response. The response was like, what's our part? What's our role? This is something that matters to God's heart. It's got to matter to his kids' hearts here too. And we're going to get into this. We're not going to do what so many people in our culture do. Who wants to talk about this subject, right? People want to turn the other way, want to, la, 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 right? It's like anything that like is uncomfortable. It's like, let's just not talk about it. Let's ignore it. It's just not comfortable. Sorry for making people uncomfortable with truth. All right, this is a reality. It's a horrendous reality. I don't know, like you say, Pastor, I don't know of a worse reality on our planet than kids being used like this. But God's kids don't get to stick their heads in the sand. We don't get to sit on the sidelines. There is too much at stake. This is too important. We have got to do our part to be able to be a part of setting these kids free. And you guys have been doing that for years now. And I'm so grateful for that. And I love watching how people across the country are doing that. I don't remember if I've told you guys that before. I mean, I've had as young as 7-year-olds that did a lemonade stand, raised $2,200 to rescue a kid. It's about $1,500 to rescue a kid and help with the aftercare. 2 7-year-olds did that. I go to nursing facilities with the 87-year-olds, and they're like, all right, how many bazaars are we going to have to go to this year, and how many things are we going to have to knit and crochet to be able to rescue a child, right? It's this whole idea of everybody can rescue kids. Like, that's my motto, is like, you can rescue kids. I can help you. I can help you figure it out. I can help you figure out your best yes. Maybe it's through your business is your best yes to rescue kids. What's that like to go have a conversation? Maybe you're the owner, you make that call. Or go talk to your boss and say, hey, this is something that really matters. Can our company start rescuing one kid a year? Can that just be a part of our DNA and who we are? You know how many kids have been rescued because someone did a conversation like that? I had a bivocational pastor called me like a month ago, and he remembered I had said that, and he went and talked to his boss. Because I told people, I'm like, you're literally like 30 seconds away from a kid getting rescued, potentially. A 30-second conversation, you might have a kid rescued just because how that's worth doing, right? 30 seconds. He calls me, he says, Chris, literally 2-minute conversation. My boss wrote a check for $20,000 to rescue 13 kids. 2-minute conversation. We've got to use our voices. We've got to use our influence. We've got to use the network of people that God has given us to raise awareness on this and to invite them in to joining us and helping to set these kids free. You might be a 30-second or 2-minute conversation away from all the difference for a child out there right now who doesn't think they have any hope and doesn't think they have any kind of a future. And it could come down to a simple 30-second conversation to make all the difference. People who like to, if you like to run and walk, I get the guy. I had a guy, I think I might have shared this story a couple of years ago. I had a guy in Pennsylvania. 30 days, he ran 520 miles across Pennsylvania. Shared it on social media, told people why he was doing it, raised enough to rescue 14 kids. And he's got a lifelong goal of rescuing. He's got a fundraising page. His goal is to rescue 100 kids. He's just planning on running until he dies. And he's going to rescue kids. He just did one last month. 7 full marathons in 7 consecutive days in 7 different states that he just ran. I had a little coronary just thinking about that right there. 7 full marathons in 7 days in a row. But that's what God's, he's got this giftedness to be able to do this. And he's taken the hobby that he loves and he's leveraging that for a kingdom purpose. And I guarantee if we go around this room, there's a whole lot of interest here, different hobbies, things that you love to do. How can you just take that and add a kingdom purpose? Get other people who love to do the same thing, raise awareness, raise resources, set kids free. And we got youth group kids doing. I got a youth group in Fort Wayne. They connected with 5 other youth groups over a little over a 2-year period. Those groups worked together on different fundraisers. And 2 months ago, they hit their 100th rescue. All teenagers. All of us can be a part of rescuing kids. God takes broken, imperfect, messed up people like you and me every single day. And he allows us to join him on his rescue work in the world around us. And that's a beautiful thing to be a part of. And you guys have a ripple effect going on with stuff here, because it's not just what you're doing here. It's this ripple effect of stuff that you have going on. Like Pastor Phil, this is my 3rd summer. I'll be going to the regional pastors huddle. It's in Mishawaka this year, not too far from me. And I've had a chance. I got to go there the first year and share, which was kind of brand new for a lot of people. Most of the pastors, that was the first year they had heard about that. And then last year I got to go back and share a lot more in depth. Pastor Phil got up and he shared about what this church is doing and what it means for you guys to be a part of this fight. And that's inspired other Calvary chapels now. Now they've had rescue Sundays now. I know Leslie was in first service and she does the painting with canvas. Some of you ladies have done that. You got 2. They're planning the 3rd one, looking at a date for the 3rd one here. And then she went down with Brian, right, and down in Tennessee. And I had a teammate went down there. They did their first Rescue Sunday last year. She did a painting canvas last year. She's got another one scheduled to do this year. You guys have this ripple effect going on when you use your voices and influence and network, and you're inviting other people. So, yeah. And Zek's dad, Ray, is over in Arizona. I don't know if you guys know this story, but I think it was maybe 4 years ago or so, he was here. He was here visiting Zek and the family, and they were supposed to fly back on Saturday. Well, the weather was really bad, so their flight got canceled. So they were stuck here in Chicago. So he ended up being here the next day, which was the Sunday I was here. He heard about this. The next Sunday went right back, did a rescue Sunday at their church the next Sunday to rescue some kids. And I was just out there in November. They just put together a big community 5K run, which a lot of the runners around there said typically any kind of first-time 5K, you get about 40 runners. They had 160 in their inaugural 5K run, and they're planning on doing it every year now. So your ripple effect is just, it's getting all over the place. It's awesome. So keep going. We're excited about all the kids, over 20,000 that have been rescued since 2011, but there's a lot more out there. And I'm guessing you're kind of like me. I got 3 girls. My girls are 21, 17, and 11, which means 2 things. Well, there's 2 things there. One is there's a lot of drama. 21, 17, and 11. Amen. You got some amens, witnesses out. Yeah, those of you who are going to give me because you're in the same situation. You're like just too tired to even like lift your hand to be like, hey, amen. You're in the thick of it, right? There's just a lot of drama, right? But the other thing I'm reminded of is I would do anything to keep my girls safe. For them to have a safe place to live. To have somebody who's fighting for them. To know that they are valued and treasured. To know about Jesus who's crazy in love with them. I'd do anything. And I'm guessing you're the same way. If you have a daughter, granddaughter, niece, especially a young lady in your life, friends. Of course we would, right? But the reality is there's 1 million kids on this planet that don't have anybody standing in the gap for them. They don't have anybody who's fighting for them, who's providing them a safe place to live, who's keeping them safe, who's telling them that they're cherished. That's telling them about Jesus. They don't have any of that. And God invites you and I to jump in and stand in the gap for those kids. So let's step up to the task. Let's be those people. Let me just close with this story. This is actually, I remember this is one of the first stories I ever heard. So as a pastor, the church I was at partnered with Destiny Rescue for 4 years before I came over full time, and now I've been over 6 years full time with Destiny Rescue. So I've been connected for over 10 years with the ministry. But there's a story I heard. Maybe the first story I ever heard that sticks with me to this day and motivates me to do what I do. And the story of a young girl named Mew, whose parents were poor. Her dad died at a young age. She went to the big city, which especially in like Southeast Asia, where about 60% of the 1 million kids are predicted to be that are being trafficked. Went to the big city because that's where more of the jobs are. Thought she was getting a job at a restaurant. She shows up and they give her a dress and some nice makeup and tell her to get, all readied up. And then what happens is one guy after another shows up at her room and uses her and abuses her all night long. And that's her introduction to what's going to happen every single night for the next 1.5 years of her life. Until people like you sent rescue and got her out of there. And then she went into our aftercare program. And a couple months after she was there, she had learned about Jesus. She had made a commitment, accepted Jesus as her Savior. And they had a Christmas party. And at the Christmas party, a room full of girls gets a little rambunctious, right? But eventually they started getting up and sharing their stories a little bit about what they had been rescued out of and what they were looking forward to. And Mew was a really quiet girl, but she eventually got up and she shared her story as well. And when she got done, she looked at our rescue agents and our caseworkers, and she said something that motivates me every day to do what I do. She simply said this. She said, "Thank you for considering my life worthy enough to come and rescue." A million kids plus out there, just in what we're talking about with trafficking, that are convinced they have no value, that they have no worth. How many girls I've talked to that have been through what these girls have been through, that were convinced that that was their only value in life, was to be used and abused by men. That was what they were going to be doing for the rest of their lives because it was all that they were good for. They got to a place where the enemy convinced them that that was truth in their lives. But because people like you use your voice as an influence, we're able to get so many of those precious kids out. And we're able to help them deal with the trauma of what they've been through. We're able to help equip them for job training so that they can take care of themselves and their loved ones in a safe way going forward. We're able to restore their dignity. We're able to introduce them to the ultimate rescuer. And we're seeing kids left and right give their lives to Jesus. Talked about during first service, we had a story in Cambodia that the gospel was shared with a bunch of kids, and they wanted to be baptized. There was no water source around that place at all. There's no pond, like nothing. So one of the members brought his pickup truck, put a tarp in the back, got a hose, filled it up, baptized 10 kids in the back of a pickup truck. I mean, kids want to meet Jesus. We're going to do whatever it takes, right, for them to experience the goodness of our God. And there's so many kids that are doing that, so many kids that are thriving now after something horrendous that they've gone through. And that's where, going back my story with the medical stuff, the one word, but, right? Usually that's a bad thing, but not in this situation. Because it was all this stuff happened, all this stuff happened, all this stuff happened, but God showed up and did what only he can do. And we're trusting him to do it again and again and again and again. And you are part of the reason why we're going to see that happen. We are on pace right now, this year, to blow away last year's record number. Like last year was like 850 higher than the year before. It's a massive jump. And the pace we're going at right now, like guys, I remember they used to years ago, on social media, they would say every week they'd put out something like 3 kids rescued this week, 4 kids. Sometimes it was 0. They were honest about that there wasn't any rescues that week. And every now and then it would hit double digits. Be like 12 kids, yes. You know, like I got a report. I get a weekly report that shows everything we did. We had 2 massive operations in one country, and in 1 week, 462 rescues. Like God is opening the door. He is granting us favor with the government connections that we have there, with other ministries that are working on the ground that are like-minded and want to get after this. And it's going to be another amazing year. And the ripple effect of that, I mean, think about it. Over 20,000 have been rescued so far. Hundreds of thousands, if not millions of lives, literally, are going to be affected because of the ripple effect of that. So, man, let's celebrate the goodness of all these kids that have been rescued and the lives that have been restored and redeemed. But then let's get back to work, because there's a lot more out there. My prayer is that you leave today, and this isn't one of those things where it's like, hey, Chris, we'll see you next year. And the next year you're like, oh, yeah, this is something that we're part of. My prayer is that you figure out what your best yes is. And then you hit me up to go, Chris, I want to figure out my best yes. And then I want your help in carrying it out, because I want to rescue kids. I mean, 150 billion, 99 billion, a million, those are huge numbers. I just want you to focus on the number one. What are you going to do in the next year to be all the difference for one kid? How can you use your voice? How can you use your influence? How can you use your talents, your passions, your hobbies? How can you leverage those in the next year to rescue one kid? Can you imagine if all of us decided to do that? Wow. That'd be amazing. So thank you for allowing me to come and share again. Thank you for leaning in and not sticking your heads in the sand. And let's keep at it, all right? So. Oh, I did. Do you want to say something about the rescue part? Yes, go ahead. Okay. One thing there's information over the table over here. The one thing I'd really encourage you to think about is this half-page size packet over there. That's the rescue partner. That's literally any monthly amount. It's just you figuring out, hey, I want to do something. And if all of us do something, God's going to put that together, and a lot of kids are going to get rescued. But I've got people who do $5, $10 a month. I have people who do $1,500 a month, which is enough to rescue a kid every single month. But it's just, again, the idea everybody can do something. So let's all do something. And I know we've got a number of rescue partners here already, but just would encourage you to consider that, because it really is all those, the little giving of individuals. And when you get tens of thousands of people across the country doing that, you get a lot of kids rescued. So please just consider that. Thanks.